In the handout we passed out, there is an article I recently published with Philippe Bernlein from Denver Academy on the topic, so you're welcome to read that and get some other information from that. But first, our little drawing here of your brain. Your emotions. So we're going to talk first about how it's supposed to work, how we're all supposed to handle our emotions. So I've got these blue lines coming out of the limbic system to represent the various emotions we might feel. And I put some of the big ones that we often see with ADHD. So excitement, frustration, anger, anxiety, depression. When these feelings are coming out, the first thing the executive functioning area of the brain, that prefrontal cortex, is supposed to do is say stop. Once it's been able to stop those emotions, so you think about basketball players coming down the court, your defense says, whoa, we're going to stop you right there. We're not, hopefully not even going to let you shoot. Then the brain says, let's think about what I'm feeling. Now the thinking about your feelings happens in a place in the brain a little bit lower underneath the prefrontal cortex called the orbital frontal cortex. The easiest way to think about it, again, it's your thinking, feeling brain. Now Aristotle had a quote where he said, the mark of a civilized man is someone who knows when they get angry. They know why they're angry, they know who they should be angry at, they know how intense it should be, they know how to express their anger, they know how to do it in an appropriate way, and they can evaluate the consequences of that expression. Okay? So that's the system that's supposed to take place, and then when you're using your thinking, feeling brain, it can communicate with your limbic system, your emotions, and it can say, chill out, let's relax, let's chill out. There's no need to be that upset about it. So that's the system that's supposed to take place. For the ADHD student, a child, teen, adult, the emotions come out, and what's missing? There's no stop. So the stop is not there, and because that's not there, we don't get down here to the thinking, feeling brain. We're not able to stop and reflect and think, as Aristotle mentioned, and those feelings come screaming right out of the child. I had an example from my group this past Wednesday. We did Animal Companion Day. So all the children, 14 kids, were supposed to bring their animals to share with the other kids. Several notes went home. The week before, we had talked about it with the group members, about it's their responsibility to remember to bring their animal. One of our group members, a little girl, a 6th grade girl, who has extreme ADHD, group starts at 4 o'clock. Now, she takes a morning dose of medication, gets her through the school day, then she takes a bumper right when she gets to group. It takes about 20 minutes to kick in. So she arrives, they're 10 minutes late, right? Her mother has ADHD and both of her siblings do as well. They're 10 minutes late, she gets out of the car, she notices the other dogs, and what does she realize? She forgot to bring her, I think her cat actually, she forgot about Animal Day. Immediate anger, immediate tears, and guess what she says to her mother? It's your fault. It's your fault. You forgot to remind me we had Animal Day today. Just absolute hysterics. I come over to her and I say, honey, it's okay. You can do it next week. You can bring your animal next week. One of the other members is doing it next week. It'll be just fine. Mom gives her medication. She kind of calms down. Comes with me over where the kids are with their animals. Now we've got 8 dogs. One which was 175 pounds. Several labs, and the teeniest little chihuahua you've ever seen. And I'm thinking we're going to have fur and animals everywhere. And I'm really worried about all that's going on. She's sitting next to me, and as soon as she sees the chihuahua, out comes the excitement. And she is just as ecstatic as could be, and proceeds for the next 20 minutes to tell me every story she can think of related to dogs and animals. Non-stop. Now, as she's talking in this ear, what am I trying to do? Lead the group and not have a disaster with animals, right? I'm really trying to prevent disasters, and I finally had to say to her, honey, you have to stop talking to me. I can't pay attention to what I need to do. But one more story. And I'm like, this is just too overwhelming. Please, can you tell me a little bit? Okay. Well then, the third emotion, which is a huge one, anxiety. In this case, it was a fairly warm day the other day. A little bee happened to fly by. She saw that bee, and she has a phobia of bees, and immediately was in terror about this bee and ready to run off and waving about hysterically, okay? Within 15 minutes, we had all three emotions. All of them came screaming right out of her. Now, about 10 minutes later, when we finish the animal day, we go back to the group, we're playing a game. She's totally different. Medication's kicked in, she's having a great time, she's playing hockey with the other kids, just handled herself magnificently. So that's the process for the ADHD student, is they have those responses, there's no stop, then they can't think about their feelings and act upon that. Now the second area where you'll see the emotional struggles is related to what Sherry said in her talk about the negative messages that special needs kids or exceptional students get over and over and over every day. So if you did the research on ADHD students, they get 10 times the negative messages as other students. So for every time I say to you, hey focus, please pay attention, I tell you 10 times. Now, if you hear that day after day after day, for 16 years, how do you feel? Pretty bad, right? And so you see that development of depression. Earlier, Ellen used the word shame. You see that emerging. And then in that orbital frontal cortex, you really collect negative messages about yourself. So then when you do reflect upon your feelings, if you do reflect upon them, very often you're looking at your emotions sort of with dark colored glasses, not rose colored glasses, dark colored glasses. You're really seeing things in a much more negative way than they actually are. Now to demonstrate that and to get you in a different part of your brain, I thought we'd do a quick exercise, and then we'll talk about some strategies on how to handle it, or how to help your child or student or yourself. And hopefully that will just emerge from our discussion. But first what I want you to do, you can close your eyes if that helps. I want you to think back to when you were a student. If you have a fifth grader, maybe try to think back to fifth grade. If you've got a college kid, think about that. And I want you to think of a positive message that you got from someone. A positive message that made you feel special, that made you feel really thrilled and confident, really gave you a warm, with little kids we talk about, a warm fuzzy. Something that really made you feel warm and fuzzy. Okay, now I want you to tuck that in one side of your brain. This time I want you to think about a negative message you got. Something that hurt your feelings, made you feel different, made you feel not included, not part of the group, lowered your self-confidence. So see if you can think of a negative. Okay, now come back to the room or open your eyes. We'll just do a show of hands. How many of you could think of the negative? Okay. Everybody. How many did everybody get a positive? How many can think of positive? Yeah. Every time I've done this over the last 25 years, the negatives are always more than the positives. The most skewed I ever saw was a group, it was an ADHD adult support group out in Aurora. It's about 20 years ago. And we did it, out of the 20 people there, everyone could remember a negative. We only had one positive out of that whole group. They could only count on one person with a positive. Now, just for illustration, would anybody care to feel vulnerable and share their positive or negative? Yes?
When I was in first grade, we had levels of reading books, and I was not allowed to read level 10 books, but they had a Free Willy book, and I really wanted to try to read the Free Willy book, and my teacher in front of all the kids in my class told me that I wasn't allowed to do that because I couldn't read that well, and so then I refused to read for 2 years.
Yeah. Man. Now, in that case, this is a really good point. Now I'll tell you my story. Is dyslexia a difficult thing to deal with? Yes. But your emotional experience caused you to refuse to read for 2 years. Now, what's the only cure for dyslexia? Reading. You have to read, right? So in your case, the emotional impairment, you could say, is bigger than the actual disability to begin with, that emotional piece. Mine was, in first grade, the teacher, and I was thinking too about Free Willy. Do you remember how popular that was with kids? That was like huge, right? And here you want to read a Free Willy book, bigger than you can handle. The teacher should have said what to you? Oh, how exciting! Let me know if you need a little help. You know, if you need assistance on those words, let me know. I'm so happy for you, right? In my case, first grade, the teacher said, okay, children, we're going to have reading groups. And she read some names, and she said, you're the giraffe reading group. It was, like maybe 30% of the kids. Then she read another list of names, about another 60% of the kids, and she said, students, you're the monkeys. Now, I ain't been called yet. Me and two other kids. And then she read our names, and she said, you're the turtles. Now, I knew what that meant. I was pretty bright. And immediately, my relationship with reading went the same way yours was, which is, reading is stupid. And in my mind, the way I made a defense, you have to protect yourself, and I'd be curious how you protected your sense of self. Mine was, well, reading is for girls. Girls do reading. Boys do math and science. And boys play football, and they play Army after school. Boys don't read after school. That's what girls do. And that's how I protected my sense of self. And I pretty much refused to read as well unless I was absolutely forced to, right? It's that negative impact of the emotions that is often, and again, bigger than whatever the problem is. Thank you. Anyone else want to share? Positive, negative? Come on. Yes?
I had an experience in 6th grade when everybody did a big assignment, and it was kind of a traditional assignment, and I approached it in a much more creative way. There was more drawing, there was more, just a more creative solution. And I turned it in, and basically I presented it to the class, and I was told that that was, basically it was too creative, and I hadn't
Stuck.
I hadn't done, I mean, I'd done everything, but it was too
Yeah.
creative, it looked too interesting. So
Yeah,
she
that's
gave me a
good.
failing grade on that.
So what he said was his project went beyond the parameters and was quite creative, but you got nailed for going past the parameters, right? Now on the flip side, I remember a dad at the Havern Center, which is a school here for learning disabled children. I'm also on the board at Denver Academy. I used to work at Havern, and we did a night with parents, and we were talking about this topic and knowing your own grief. Like, as a parent, you have to understand your own grief to help your kid. You really have to understand that. And a dad raised his hand. Now, his was positive. One day in history class, he made a catapult that out of clothespins and rubber bands, and was shooting little paper ones. Okay, and it worked. And his history teacher came up to him in the middle of class, saw it. Now, what's the kid thinking? I'm busted. And instead, the history teacher said, I'll give you $5 for it. And he said, make me a couple more and I'll pay you for those too. I asked the dad, what's he do now? This guy designs mechanical hands. He owns a business that designs robotic hands. Okay? Now, if that teacher had taken it away, who knows? You can really crush someone's dreams. I got to tell you, when I failed penmanship, art in 1st grade, and penmanship, it really didn't help with my sense of creativity after that, right? I don't particularly like to draw in front of people, but I did it today. I thought, I can handwrite this. I did misspell limbic. Fortunately, my son had his phone, and he Googled the limbic system, and he said, yeah, that's an I, not a Y. I'm like, okay, thanks, man. So you got to have spell check, right? Any other positives? Anyone want to share a positive? Majority, I'll tell you mine, majority of the messages that you get, for most people, where do you think they go back to? School. When I gave you the exercise, I didn't say anything about who was giving you the message, right? But people tend to go back to school, right? The positives or negatives they got at school. My positives for me, and this is one of the strategies to help your student, was my 3rd grade teacher, Miss Hunter, who was probably 22 at the time, right? Right out of college, really cute. I was in love with her. And she said in one class one day, she was talking about similes. Now, I don't understand what verbs are, nouns are, adverbs. I never got any of that stuff. Phonics just does not work for me. But I do remember similes, because she said, for instance, I could say, Craig's eyes are as blue as the ocean. And in that moment, I looked at her, and I was like, we're getting married. You and I, baby, we're blowing the school. We're out of here, we're going to Tahiti, me and you. And I remember that the rest of my life. Now, how did she make me feel? Special. There was something unique about me. I couldn't spell my way out of a paper bag, but I had blue eyes. And she noticed that and made a comment, something unique to me. One of the statements I said earlier was the special needs child gets 10 negatives for every positive that the others, or yeah, 10 to 1 negatives compared to other children. So the first strategy is lots of positive messages for your students or your children and teens. They need a lot of positives. They get a lot of negative. They need to hear good things about themselves. I'd love to talk to teachers about, have nicknames for the kids. You know, just a little nickname that says, you're special to me. There's a Hungarian proverb that says, a child with many names is well loved. So when you have nicknames for kids and you're giving them positive messages throughout the day, that really helps compensate for the negatives and for the struggles. So lots of positive messages. Secondly, the students and the kids need opportunities to talk about their emotions. If you bottle up all that shame and the negative messages, it only gets worse. And over time, again, you see about 4 times the rate of depression in ADHD adults. Dyslexic kids, interestingly enough, can be very social. And it does have a huge impact on social skills. They're very social, but they avoid formal social interactions. What is their fear if they go to Sunday school? What could happen to them? You might have to read. When I was in 7th grade, the teacher said, Craig, would you please stand up and read out of the Bible? And there was girls in the class, right? I'm a 7th grade guy. I butchered several words, right? A little boy next to me, this kid next to me said, it was something like you idiot or something, right? I went home that day and I said to my mom, I'm never going back to Sunday school again. And my mom was really smart about something. She was very dedicated to our faith. And she said, you have 2 choices. You can go back to that class, or you can go teach 1st graders. Guess which one I picked? I'm teaching 1st graders, right? And I learned how to work with kids and be with kids. That helped change. It was a career direction for me. I worked with kids all day long. I wasn't ready to go back and stand and read the Bible in front of others. I do preach in churches. I have a Master of Divinity. When I go to a church to preach, they'll often say to me, would you like to read the gospel? And I always say, oh, no, thank you. Why don't you have a pastor read that? I'll just do the sermon, right? I really don't want to read the Bible. When my son was in preschool, he would pick this one author to read. When I'd come twice a week to the preschool to read to the children. What author did he pick that would put the fear of God in him? Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss has all these made-up words, phonics. I'd be like, oh no, I'm going to have to be asking the 4-year-olds how you say these names, right? And Harry Potter. I actually read Harry Potter. I love to read now. I read magazines, newspapers all the time. I read the first couple Harry Potters. When I got to that girl's name, this was before the movie, Hermione. Now I looked at that and I thought, Sue. I'm going to call her Sue. For the rest of Harry Potter, I just put Sue in where it said Hermione because I absolutely had no frame of reference to understand that. Okay? Kids need the opportunity when they've struggled to talk about what that's like. Did any of your kids ask to have dyslexia or ADHD? No, right? Nobody really signs up for it. Now, can you help them see positives out of it? Yes, there's a larger statistically for dyslexic students. There's a higher percentage of entrepreneurs that are dyslexic. What do entrepreneurs have to learn? How to delegate things to others. They have to learn how to work really hard. They have to be creative and find solutions, just like our dyslexic students. ADHD people, the excitement. Are ADHD people incredibly fun to be around? The majority are, right? Half my staff that works for me is ADHD. We have a really fun group of people. They work great with those children. We have some amazing parties. Nathaniel Warren at the last one, our Christmas party, we had a photo collage, and I can't put it up at the office because children would see it. Like, I can't show those photos. We were wild. We had so much fun. Now, getting them to turn in paperwork, checks, follow through on phone calls, guess what that's like? It's total hell for me. Right? I have to micromanage all the time to make sure those things are done. But you want to see the other side, which I have really gifted, fun people that I'm surrounded by. But the only way you get to there is if your child can open up and express their emotions and talk about what they're feeling, including what they're angry about. So if you ever watched Leave It to Beaver when you were a kid, and this is an important strategy when you're dealing with emotions. When Beaver got in trouble, he would go to the office, Ward would have a talk with him, about what he did and give him the consequences. Okay? Then the show would cut to commercial. When they came back after the commercial, does anybody remember, a few of you are close to my age, does anybody remember what the final scene was? They would be playing catch, usually in Beaver's room, maybe sock basketball, and then Warden Beaver would have a talk about why he did what he did. What were his feelings that caused that? For the little girl I mentioned earlier with Animal Day, her and I and her mother set up a plan where they have a feeling corner. Mom's really into kind of meditation, so she's got a meditation corner. And the agreement is that when the little girl gets upset, they're not going to talk about it right then. They'll wait till they get home, later in the evening, or maybe sometime on the weekend. They'll sit in a feeling corner and discuss it then. Okay? This little girl is very bright. When her medication is kicked in, I can have some amazing discussions with her when she's calm. When she's revved up, is that the time to talk? No. You do not talk when they're revved up. You save that for a little later. You just kind of pull them aside, take a break, and then you try to talk about it. Finally, problem solving. Our students, again, when they just shoot out like this, there's not much thought or step-by-step plan for how do you problem solve with this issue or this feeling that's going on. So in the case of that girl getting out of her car, she sees the animals. I was able to kind of slow her down, and then we were able to talk about, today you could just tell us about your animal, or you could bring your animal next week. It's your choice. We can kind of figure that out. It's going to be okay. But really following step-by-step patterns all the way through the finish line. So for most of our ADHD students, they do their homework. What's the last part they don't do? They don't stick it in the notebook to turn in. It gets stuck in the bottom of the backpack, or they don't put their name on it. So really teaching them, let's go through things step by step by step. On the handout, I'll finish up, is of the article. The very back page shows the 3 steps. It also shows a problem-solving process that was developed out of the University of Minnesota for ADHD students, and has got some pretty good research behind it. And you can modify this, obviously, for the older student or college student. Last thing I'll say is one of the greatest gifts I ever got was a junior high student. He had been in group for about 2 years. We're on our final camping trip. We're up in the mountains, we're camping, we're sitting around the campfire, talking with the kids about what they learned in group that summer. And this young man, Anthony, looked at me and he said, I learned that I don't need you anymore. I have my friends. And I was like, that's the best rejection I've ever had. Because not only could he share his feelings with me, but he learned to share his emotions with his friends. He was able to make that connection, slow himself down, and discuss his emotions with his buddies and get some support from them, just like the Project I. If you think about the support they're getting, tremendous. Thank you. Any questions?